was an executive with Uranium One all the way up to the point where when they pulled it all back to Moscow, the story was really the corruption and the amounts paid to the Clintons and the Clinton Foundation. I'm a big gold bug of what's happening with financial the financial mismanagement of the central banks.
International Stacker.
Ladies and gentlemen, your boy International Stacker is back, but I'm not talking about silver. No, I'm not talking about gold. I'm talking about the stuff that changed the history of the world.
One stacker on a journey to find silver. International Stacker.
Hey everybody, International Stacker back, and I've got a legend in the industry to introduce to you today. He is Scott Melbye. He's the Chief Executive Officer, President, and Director, three amazing titles, by the way, of Uranium Royalty Corporation. He's been the director there since 2017, and then he became the CEO president in October of 2019. So congratulations on that, sir. He's got over 35 years of experience in the nuclear energy industry, which we're going to touch today, guys. You do not want to tune out. This industry is literally about to explode. He's held various leadership positions in various uranium mining companies and industry organizations. He's also was previously the vice president of commercial at Uranium Participation Corporation from 2014 to 18. And this is one of the most important parts right here. He was an advisor to the chairman of Kazatomprom, the National Uranium Company of Kazakhstan, until March of 2018. I think I'll drop. That's nice. That's very awesome. And sir, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Borat joke.
Yeah, there you go. No Borat joke. I'm going to turn it over to you for a minute or two. Just tell us a little bit about yourself, and then I'm going to hit you with some crazy questions. I hope you're ready for it.
Absolutely. Well, it's really a pleasure to be on with your viewers and to talk about uranium and nuclear energy. I think you're following certainly understands supply and demand fundamentals for various commodities. And I think uranium is probably at a point in the cycle that we haven't seen in many, many years. And that's after a long bear market following the events of Fukushima, but we've largely climbed out of that from a demand side and a supply side. So we'll get into that. But yeah, I've been in the uranium industry now 36 years, including brokerage and trading of uranium globally, buying uranium for a nuclear power plant in Arizona. But much of my career has been on the mining side, including three of the four largest uranium mining companies in the world, including Cameco out of Canada, one of the largest publicly traded companies. Also Uranium One, the famous Uranium One that is now owned by the Russians, and Kazatomprom out of Astana, Kazakhstan. So again, it's just a pleasure to be on and happy to dive into a discussion on uranium and nuclear.
Wow, you hit some really interesting facts there. This is going to be, I think, a great interview, and I think the viewers already have 10 trillion questions. But the first question is, I mean, we all know uranium's used for like nuclear weapons and stuff, right? But like, what are the uses? What is uranium exactly? What's it really used for?
Yeah, that's one of the challenges in terms of public perception towards nuclear energy is that, we were born out of essentially the weapons programs of the 40s. But it was really Dwight D. Eisenhower in 1950 with Atoms to Peace that really shifted the focus to electricity generation, medical isotopes, now even today looking at water desalination, hydrogen production, space travel. So the uses for uranium are quite varied and certainly peaceful uses are the main focus of our company's activities. The supply and demand that we're seeing today clearly is driven by acceptance towards nuclear power too, and I'm sure you'll have some questions on that, but we're really being caught up in this mega trend towards clean, green, carbon-free energy, and whether you agree with those policies or not, we're in a unique position now to where we always enjoyed in the United States a strong support from Republican administrations as part of an all-the-above energy strategy, coal, oil, nuclear, wind, solar. Now we're in a Biden administration that's, is indicated they're going to make it pretty tough on fossil fuels. And if they do so, canceling Keystone Pipeline, canceling federal leases and joining the Paris Accord, they're going to need to figure out how to deliver electricity and do it cleanly. And nuclear clearly plays a key role, and certainly the new administration has acknowledged that. So it's nice to have bipartisan support in a time back in DC where they don't seem to agree on anything these days. So it's a nice position to be in.
No, you know, that's interesting you say that. And I think we'll circle back there on green energy, but there's no way we're going to be able to wind and solar our way out of not using fossil fuels. So definitely, we could have the nuclear triad. That's the non-weapon nuclear triad, but it's, nuclear clean, which is part of that clean energy conglomerate. So I think you made a good point there. And the interesting thing you said is space travel. Lately, I've been talking about, I think the next place where mining is going to be fire. I think the first trillionaire is going to be he or she who is able to mine in space, whether it's, meteors or whether it's different planets. So that kind of dovetails into the next question, like at least on Earth, where can you find uranium on Earth? Where does it occur? But also, is that going to be an opportunity in space to be able to mine it out there as well?
I totally agree in terms of space mining and those kind of possibilities down the road. As we sit today, uranium is quite an abundant element in the Earth's crust, but the challenge is finding it in economic concentrations or high enough ore grades or uranium which is susceptible to in situ recovery type techniques. So you can mine it economically and sell it for a profit into the market. So the countries that have really led, the United States led global uranium production as recent as the 1980s, but then we've seen the emergence of Canada, primarily the province of Saskatchewan with high-grade mines, and then more recently Kazakhstan, which kind of came out of the Soviet Union and their nuclear programs. So those countries continue to be important. Australia, Namibia in Southern Africa, Niger in Central West Africa, also major producers. So it's definitely a global commodity. A lot of it today is being concentrated in kind of the former Soviet Union. If you look at the United States today, nuclear provides 20% of our power. It's over 50% of carbon-free energy, but we're getting close to 50% of our uranium supplies from former Soviet countries like Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, and Russia. So there has been a lot of discussion in the Trump administration, now continuing into the new administration in Congress, what can be done to revitalize our domestic uranium industry. And certainly we have over 1 billion pounds of known and likely resources in the Western United States. So this is not something we have a shortage of. And we've seen the vulnerabilities in critical minerals, rare earth minerals, and China taking over, control of that. Well, the Russians have, and Chinese, frankly, in uranium around the world are trying to really dominate that. So I think it's important for us to look at our Western supplies and clearly U.S. supplies for the American market as well.
Now, it's interesting you say that because, I do travel the world and my viewers know that I work emergency management. And, the reason I came back to the United States is I really am afraid to say this word on YouTube because the bots, but I call it the beer flu, right? So beer is Corona and the flu virus, right? So the reason I came back to the United States was to help with that. I was in Maryland for a while. Now I'm in the state of Illinois, and Illinois, I believe, has the most nuclear power plants in the nation. Is that accurate?
Absolutely. So Exelon, who's based out of Warrenville outside of Chicago, is the largest U.S. nuclear utility and operating plants throughout Illinois and Pennsylvania and New York. So one of the leaders in the U.S., as is Duke Power, Dominion Energy, Southern Nuclear out of Alabama and Georgia. They're building 2 new reactors near Augusta in the Vogtle site. So those are kind of the big states in the U.S. that utilize nuclear. Globally, France is the largest country utilizing nuclear energy. Over 70% of their electricity comes from nuclear power, which is interesting because they are neighbors to Germany, which kind of took another approach and decided to phase out their nuclear power program over a number of years. And it's if you want to know what the Green New Deal looks like, you just need to look at Germany because they've spent hundreds of billions of euros on this green energy economy and turned their back on nuclear at the same time. And it's just resulted in carbon emissions 10 times that of France and electricity prices twice that, 50% higher than that of France. So we have a lot of examples to see what happens if you go nuclear. Sweden is a great example, heavy reliance on nuclear power in addition to the hydro that they're blessed with up there. Very low carbon emissions, and already meeting sort of a lot of these targets of no or low carbon by 2030, 2040, 2050. Some of these places like Sweden, Ontario, Canada, very high reliance on nuclear and already kind of ahead of the low carbon game.
Yeah, no, they're definitely regretting that one, I'm sure. And I'm showing a little chunk of silver here. And the interesting thing with silver is this is 0.999, right? So if I was to mine silver and this was like 0.6 or something, or 60%, you could keep refining it until you could get to that 999 or nearly perfect. And the same here with gold, this little chunk of gold here I'm holding from Austria. Question is with the materials you're dealing with uranium, if you get a lower grade uranium, can you keep refining that until it's high grade? Or is it kind of like oil where, oil from Saudi Arabia is a certain grade that could be used for certain things, whereas oil from shale oil is different? What does that look like with uranium?
Yeah, it's interesting because uranium is mined all over the world. It's mined in deposits which are very different from each other, but the end product, which is sold to the electric utility companies, called uranium concentrates, U3O8 or yellow cake. And so that comes out of the ground with a natural, not to get into a science class here, but it comes out of the ground with a natural level of the U-235 isotope at about 0.7%. So that level of U-235 and natural uranium does not allow it to actually be used in a fission reactor at that stage. It needs to be enriched in the 235 isotope to the 5-6% level in a commercial reactor. So that's the stage where the uranium is converted to a gas and then goes into a centrifuge and is enriched in that isotope for weapons or other military uses. I mean, the enrichment levels are up in the 90%. So it's not an easy step to get from commercial electricity reactor grade to weapons grade. That's the major barrier to entry, if you will.
So we're not refining, we're enriching. And that makes sense, because I remember in Iran when they had their facility that was had the virus uploaded by the Israelis, I think is the StockNet virus or something. And that basically made the centrifuges, I think, fail to disrupt their enriching, right?
Absolutely, yeah. The Stuxnet virus caused these high-speed centrifuges to just throw off the harmonics just a slight amount, which caused the centrifuges to literally spin off their axles. So quite a mess. But
and just to confirm, yellow cake is a lot like yellow snow, right? We should not eat the yellow cake.
You don't want to eat yellow cake, although it's not as toxic as a lot of things that you might even have under your kitchen sink, but you should not eat it. That's a good advice.
I got that down on my board here. So kind of circling back to, I think one of the most critical points you were speaking about earlier, and kind of why I've been kind of looking at uranium, and I've kind of been looking at other things. We're in one of the craziest times of our history, and I really believe we're in a time that's going to be big moves can be made for he or she who can kind of look and kind of predict the future, so to say, without actually predicting it. So I really am looking at, with the current administration, whether you like them or not, we're not getting into that, but they are totally into green energy. And, just like California with solar panels in 2022, all houses have to have solar panels. So that's why, the thing I say is, with silver, even if tomorrow people decided it was worth nothing, they hated coins, hated bars, whatever, it still has a significant industrial demand. And you kind of alluded to it earlier. What's your viewpoint on, with nuclear power? Is it going to be, eventually considered green energy? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the big, if your viewers have seen and followed the uranium sector over the last year, we've seen an incredible appreciation of all the uranium stocks, whether it's the mining companies, the physical inventory companies, or royalty and streaming companies like ours. We've seen incredible investor appetite from the ESG, the health, safety, environment kind of aspects of mining and ethical investing coming into mining. almost a realization in recent years that nuclear does fit that clean, green energy criteria. We've always known it was baseload power, no carbon emissions, no air pollution, which, I mean, in China, you're probably not fretting about climate change or carbon emissions as much as you are just breathing clean air. And nuclear addresses both of those. So it really is getting greater acceptance amongst politicians, environmentalists, investment community. The Biden administration is a great example. I just had the opportunity to testify before the Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee on Thursday of last week on a nuclear energy panel. And, 10, 15, 20 years ago, that would have been an opportunity for anti-nuclear senators to just jump on the soapbox and really come after nuclear energy. We had none of that. And if there were senators we thought might have leaned towards anti-nuclear, they didn't express it in that hearing. And in fact, some Democratic senators, like the chairman, Joe Manchin from West Virginia, actually came out strongly in support of and basically pointed out the obvious, that renewables, there's nothing wrong with renewables. They play a role, but we have to recognize they have really big limitations, such as their intermittent power. They run 25 to 30% of the time at best. That would be the best wind farm in, say, Iowa or southern Minnesota.
Right.
We've got to do something about the other 75%. Now, previous administration filled that gap with coal, gas, oil, and other means. But if that's being de-emphasized in this administration, there's really no choice but to go with nuclear. Again, it's already 50% or more of our carbon-free energy, providing 20% of the electricity. I think globally, uranium nuclear power provides 10% of global electricity, but a full third of carbon-free energy. So not only do we need to preserve and take advantage of the existing fleet, we've also got to move forward, whether it's big reactors that are being built in China or India or 30 other countries around the world, or the small modular reactors or advanced reactors. And this is an exciting field that if I was 21 and coming out of school today, I would get into this industry. These are being invested into by the likes of Bill Gates, Peter Thiel. They've done the math and science on renewables, and they recognize we've got to do something. We can't, conservation going forward in a society that's more electrified than ever, with everything being computerized. Right. Electric vehicles. I mean, Elon Musk thinks our electricity demand could double with just a likely expected rollout of electric vehicles around the world. So we have a huge, huge job ahead of us to deliver electricity and then do it cleanly. I mean, I think you mentioned California is great. They want to be all electric cars by 2030, 2040. They can't even deliver electricity to homes and businesses in 2021. So, I mean, they got to get first things first, but nuclear is a great solution. Unfortunately, they have a plant that provides 5% of their energy halfway between San Francisco and LA at Diablo Canyon in San Luis Obispo, which is a perfect source of clean, green energy, operated safely, efficiently, effectively for a number of years, could run another 30 years on its license. But they're obviously taking an ideological approach there, and that's just going to result in more carbon emissions and less reliable electricity. I mean, we've seen that already with PG&E in Northern California. So again, nuclear's time, I think, has really come. And so, we look at it as an investor looking at uranium. We know the demand's great. We know the demand is growing for nuclear. So what's the supply side? And that's been interesting because we've come from a period of very low uranium prices for the last 8-9 years, which has caused a lot of the production around the world to go offline as their hedges, their long-term contracts rolled off with utilities. They basically weren't selling at $40, $50, $60 a pound. They were having to sell at the prevailing uranium price at $20 a pound, which is well below production costs. So we're now today consuming globally around 175 million pounds of uranium a year, but we're only producing 120 to 130 million from global mines. That's a great situation for investors because it's drawing down finite inventories and secondary supplies that's going to cause, we always look at supply squeezes and silver and everything else. This is a real supply squeeze, but it's not being generated by sort of artificial factors. It's pure nuts and bolts supply and demand factors that are causing uranium scarcity in the coming years. We're going to need new mines. all around the world to meet this new generation of uranium mines supporting the nuclear fleet around the world. And that's where Uranium Royalty fits in as a capital provider to mines, whether they're in the United States, Canada, Africa, Australia, to provide the development capital in exchange for a financial interest in that mine's success down the road. Excuse me, we'll take a financial royalty or a actual stream of the physical uranium, which we'll then hold or sell into the market.
Now, what is the spot price? You know, we call it the spot price for gold and silver. Like, what is the market price like roundabout today for uranium? And is that done by the ounce, the kilogram? What's that done by?
Yeah, the measure is the old-fashioned pound. We call it pounds of U3O8, and that trades in the spot market at around $30 to $31 a pound. In recent times, we've seen uranium prices in 2007 at $138 a pound. We've seen $70 prices in 2010, but we've also seen $17 prices in 2016. So quite a bit of fluctuation. But the last 8 years, we've seen prices kind of at or below that $30 a pound level, which is just not promoted investment in new mines, even though the demand for uranium has largely recovered to pre-Fukushima levels, and we're generating more electricity from nuclear power than ever. So it's, if you were an economist looking at any commodity, whether it's copper, gold, silver, and you saw this kind of situation developing, you'd be very bullish. And I think it explains why we're seeing not just specialist hedge funds and institutions and retail investors, but generalists as well now coming in and buying uranium on the strong fundamentals. And they were made even better. I mean, hate to say, but through the COVID 2020 was a real positive for uranium fundamentals because it didn't impact the demand for uranium. The nuclear plants continued to run 24/7, but a number of the mines around the world were impacted, and we lost 50% of global uranium production at one point last year, and we're still seeing residual effects this year. So a really great supply and demand setup. I know a lot of your viewers would follow supply and demand in other commodities. I think you'll like the setup in this one right now.
When you talk about, mining it, so like when you're mining gold, you can get a byproduct of silver, right? As a miner, when you're mining like copper and, metals that are needed for industry, a byproduct of that is silver. When you mine uranium, is there anything else that gets mined as a byproduct, or is it strictly uranium?
Yeah, there is. It could be the other way around, though, that historically, particularly in South Africa, all the gold production down there often came with a high amount of, or a commercial amount of uranium byproduct with the gold production. And so South Africa was a major producer for many years from gold mines, but as those gold mines get deeper and costlier, they become less of a player there. But uranium can occur with cobalt, nickel, lithium, a number of other things. Something that occurs as a byproduct to uranium that is significant is rare earth minerals and some of these critical minerals that are of such interest that we're relying on in China. We have uranium deposits in the United States or facilities that process uranium that can handle those rare earth minerals. So we might be able to kill two birds with one stone and produce uranium and supply rare earth minerals.
So like with your company, when you all have mines going, are you getting because I know lithium is important for like batteries, right? Nickel's important for that type of thing too. Rare earth metals for everything coming in the future. Like, do you also mine those others, or do you just focus on the uranium?
Yeah, well, we have Uranium Royalty has 15 royalties and streams in our portfolio. We're a relatively new company, but that's quite a substantial portfolio. We launched publicly in December of 2019. And, some of the notable projects we have, not a lot of byproduct production, but I will tell you it's something we have set a high priority to really establish new counterparties in that area. But we've got interest in the world's two largest uranium mines in Saskatchewan, Canada, Cigar Lake and McArthur River. Ore grades 100 times the world average. It would be the equivalent of those mines would be like the Escondida mine, the copper mine in Chile, or the Grasberg gold mine in Indonesia, that kind of magnitude. And so we have that. We have interest in a restart mine in Namibia at Langer Heinrich. Really great mine that's produced several million pounds a year. We've got interest in the U.S. in situ recovery. We like the U.S. Uranium industry because of the interest that the government has shown, but also because of their ability to produce uranium cheaply and efficiently and environmentally friendly way through in situ recovery, which isn't underground or open pit mining. It's more of a drilling technology where we drill into a sandstone ore body and oxidize the uranium and pump it to the surface as a solution. So we don't have any mill tailings, waste rock, tunnels, drilling, blasting. Nothing wrong with that. We love conventional mining too, but some of the U.S. mines really have an environmental advantage, which is a real, let's face it, that's the social license to operate a mine anywhere in the world is important. So we've got to do it safely and in an environmentally friendly way.
That's really interesting. So essentially almost fracking, but for uranium, right? The way that works.
It's not fracking because we're not breaking up the deposit. We're actually just, the uranium in a sandstone ore body basically was deposited that way in the first place in minute amounts of groundwater flowing through the sandstone.
Okay.
In our case, in say South Texas, the percolating hydrocarbon gases from the Eagleford Shale kind of rising to the surface and cause that uranium to go out of solution and into a reduced state. And so it just millions of years of that caused the uranium to accumulate in specific areas. So we go in there and just reverse the natural process by injecting, it's effectively Perrier water, sodium bicarbonate, which gets the uranium off the grains of sand and pumped to the surface. So again, it's environmentally advantageous, but for the US, it's probably the way that it can compete with some of these big mines in Kazakhstan and Canada.
Wow. So, we touched on the price of uranium, and it's, so it's done by the pound, right? We're all used to troy ounces really, but the pound, that's interesting. Now, who sets that price? Is it the same way as gold and silver? It's just set by the market?
No, it's a little more of a niche business. I mean, we're not the most efficient market like copper or gold, where you can buy and sell on a Bloomberg terminal, huge amounts, and frankly, not have much impact on the market unless you're a central bank or some of these bigger holders of gold. But uranium is traded in a more of a relationship market where producers and traders of uranium contract directly with other buyers and utilities, and all that uranium commercial activity is kind of contained in a closed loop within the global nuclear fuel cycle, and therefore it's also we're able to safeguard against proliferation and things like that. We can assure that uranium from a mine in Texas is converted in a plant in Ontario. It's enriched in a plant in the UK. It might be fabricated into fuel in Sweden and end up in a reactor in Korea. It's that kind of international market because it's high value. The energy density of uranium is unlike any other energy commodity. So a little bit of uranium goes a long way. So we can ship nuclear fuel, on an international basis like that. But the market reporters are two companies, one out of Georgia and one out of Denver, Colorado, that quotes the daily, weekly, and monthly spot price for uranium. And they also report the long-term prices that are paid by utilities to producers in new contracts. And that's where we've been with the low spot price. It's caused the long-term price to really be below what producers need to produce to make a profit. So they've shut in production, kept the pounds in the ground. They're more valuable to be sold into a future market than to blow it out in a low price environment. So we really, we're in an exciting stage where demand is high, supply is low. Utilities need to come back to a sort of a normal procurement cycle, which has been below normal levels for the last 7 or 8 years, and it didn't make it easier. With COVID, I think they were more concerned about keeping their power plants running than buying uranium. But 2021 looks to be a year where we see a lot of utilities come back and contract, and that's going to cause the price formation and price discovery that we need to kind of see the uranium price going up. It's already going up $3 or $4 in the last 3 or 4 weeks on actually some producer buying, which has been interesting. The producers have realized that uranium's gotten so cheap. It's not that they don't want to produce, but to complement their production, they're buying uranium at under $30 a pound, which would put it in the first quartile of production costs globally. So if you can buy it in the drum at that conversion facility where the utilities need it, why not? And so we've seen a lot of that producer buyings push the price up $3 to $4 a pound just in the last couple of weeks.
Now, I highly doubt I can stack this like gold and silver without ending up on the no-fly list. But the question for you is like, how is the only way to get exposure in this is to like buy into stocks with companies, or what's the way to get exposure to that?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I mean, obviously, private ownership of uranium is not possible for very good reasons.
What the heck? What the heck?
There are a couple of countries that kind of outside of the international UN safeguards. That would be like North Korea or Iran, but all the other countries of the world are under this safeguards umbrella. But as an investor, you can invest in physical uranium, which your viewers love physical commodities. You can invest in physical uranium by buying a company, Uranium Participation Corp in the US or in Canada, or Yellowcake out of London. My company, URC, is the largest or one of the largest shareholders in Yellowcake out of London. They just buy uranium, warehouse it, and allow you to speculate on the commodity while they hold it, not you hold it. Another way is to buy into the pure equity companies, the mining companies. There's blue chip companies that are $6 billion in market cap, and there's a number of other smaller junior companies that are in the 2 to 500 million market cap. And there's a number of those producers that are developing new mines and be really success stories going forward. So you're going to get a lot more torque to the uranium story buying the individual equities, but you also have the highest risk because you're counting on them to execute on a mine plan, be able to produce uranium for a profit at a low cost and sell it for a profit. Some in-betweens, there are some ETFs that invest in a basket of uranium mining companies. That obviously diversifies your risk, so that's another way to be exposed. Or uranium royalty company, our company is diversified risk, but pure play in uranium. So when you invest in our company, you have financial interests in 15 different mines in 4 or 5 different jurisdictions around the world. And you're going to continue to benefit from our growth as we're going out and adding new mines and developments into the portfolio.
Now, maybe you kind of just touched on it probably, but why have uranium stocks gone nuclear? And yes, I did intend the pun, and I'm not a dad yet, but maybe that was a dad joke. I don't know. But why are uranium stocks kind of, in recent times seeing some action? Yeah,
I mean, a lot of the sort of go-to uranium names have seen appreciation in their share price from the COVID lows to today of 400% to 600%, some 700%. And you might say, well, I missed out on it. But no, they were at such a low level, both due to the supply and demand, depressed market, and just COVID impacts on the market. So they've gone up quite dramatically from a year ago, March of last year. But they're still, in terms of their P to NAV and what they have and what they can contribute in a uranium market that has only now begun to recover. There's still a lot. I would say we're in the first or second inning of this game. So whether you invest in physical, you invest in an ETF or a royalty company, we're the only one in uranium space, or the equities, you're getting exposure to uranium, which is now, moving out of the 20s into the low 30s. Probably $40 to $50 is the area that the best mines in the world need to incentivize their production. But most new mine developments probably need 50, 60 or higher. So the supply and demand narrative, right now couldn't be better. So we're seeing a lot of that investment come in. And I think the other thing that we mentioned was the socially responsible investing, ESG investing in clean energy. There's so much money going into that space, and there's only so many wind, solar, battery companies that those funds can invest in. They're now beginning to invest in nuclear, especially if it's being blessed by the EU, which we've seen very significant steps in the European community acknowledging that nuclear is clean and green. In the Biden administration, I mean, we just had Gina McCarthy, who is one of the president's climate advisors, basically acknowledged, no, nuclear plays a central role in a lower carbon Biden administration. So we're seeing a lot of inflows due to that sort of recognition.
Now you mentioned, and I cannot resist to ask this question. I'm sorry, Homeland Security side of me. So you mentioned earlier about Uranium One, and I know a lot of my viewers know about that because we discussed that before in a different world events. Now, do you think it's risky, to sell to a foreign country, access to a company like that in terms of ownership, or do you think it's just purely like just a normal business play and it might change hands a trillion other times in the future? Like, what's your thoughts on that?
No, I mean, being in that company and was an executive with Uranium One all the way up to the point where, even after the Russians took it completely private, and then when they pulled it all back to Moscow and Europe, I left the company at that stage. So, again, the important thing to state is I don't think U.S. national security was ever at threat because of the Russians acquiring those assets in Wyoming. Uranium that is produced in the United States or any civilized country around the world is in that safeguard system, right? All uranium is tracked from point A to point B and stays within the commercial nuclear fuel cycle. So there would have been no way for uranium from Wyoming to end up in illicit programs that the Russians might, turn a blind eye to. The story was really the corruption and the amounts paid to the Clintons and the Clinton Foundation to establish the company in the first place back when the mines, Uranium One acquired the mines in Kazakhstan in exchange for over $100 million contribution to the Clinton Foundation. And then more recently, when the CFIUS review of a foreign investment review of the Russian investment in US mines was just kind of fast-tracked by the Clintons and was achieved. There was another series of significant contributions to the Clinton Foundation. So it was really a story about corruption and public corruption, but I don't think we were ever in danger, other than it's probably not a good idea to allow Russia to have interest in energy assets like that in the United States. I'm pretty sure we couldn't invest in energy or critical installations in Russia or China. So I don't know why we would let it happen here. But anyway, it was an interesting chapter. Again, more about corruption than I think national security. But
I mean, $100 million, that's just a speaking fee, I thought. I don't think that's anything crazy. So let me ask you a little bit, because like I'm super fit into physical, as you can see here. This is just a little taste of my hoard. But talking to you, I am getting pretty super interested in this. And all jokes aside, I do find this quite interesting. I do think there's going to be a big move to clean energy. So I'm kind of interested in the sector as a whole, but I want to learn a little bit more about you. So can you tell me a little bit more about your company and kind of your business model and maybe what sets you apart from the others?
Yeah, sure. So Uranium Royalty Corp, we're on the TSX Venture Exchange under the ticker symbol URC. Very shortly, we hope to be listed on either the NYSE or the NASDAQ. We're in the process of filing our paperwork to make that happen. And, we're so far meeting the criteria for that. So that won't be long. That presently you would have to trade URC in the US under URCCF, which is the over-the-counter ticker, but we expect to have a full US listing before too long. Our website is uraniumroyalty.com. There's a lot of good information there. If you want more general information about nuclear energy, the World Nuclear Association out of London is just a great source of information on what's happening all over the world. The Nuclear Energy Institute in the US is another good website to go to. But again, if you are students of supply and demand and other commodities, I think you'll look at what's building here with demand at almost record levels for uranium, production 40 to 60 million pounds below consumption presently.
Oh, yeah.
That's got to be a nice setup for drawing down these inventories and getting the uranium price heading back up towards 40.
How is uranium shipped? Is it in ships or?
It's shipped in drums, 30-gallon drums, either by truck or by rail or by ship. And
Okay.
again, at that stage, it's not the most toxic materials. I mean, again, you wouldn't want to eat it, but it probably wouldn't kill you either. But you know, you shouldn't eat a lot of things under your kitchen sink. But it's shipped quite safely by truck or rail to these conversion facilities. It gets more sort of challenging in terms of transportation the further down the fuel cycle. But even as fabricated fuel, it's quite safe in terms of transportation. Spent fuel is more of a challenge, but even that
Right.
is manageable. The volumes of spent nuclear fuel, I think, really would surprise people. It would fit all on the size of one American football field in terms of what we've produced in the U.S. since the 1950s. So we're not talking about a huge volume, and we've
Does a
saved
lot of
all.
it get burnt up? So or how does that
Yeah,
work?
so this fuel, there's still a lot of energy left in spent nuclear fuel, probably as much as 75, 80%. So, you know, there is a school of thought to say, hey, let's store it in a secure facility. And then, you know, 50 years from now, we may need to go back and reprocess that like the Japanese or the French have done in their fuel cycles. So we recycle everything else. I don't know why we don't recycle uranium fuel, but we could. But you know, storing it is also not a scientific issue. It's just more of a political issue of finding a region, city, county with the right geology that will host the facility. So again,
we'll just put it under the mountains in Nevada. No problem. No problem there.
well, yeah. I mean, as being in a mining company, we realized that there's a lot of geologic formations that really haven't changed much in hundreds of thousands or millions of years. So storing it in a stable geologic formation doesn't sound very risky to geologists, but you know, you have to convince the local communities that it's right for them, and there would be a lot in it for them. But again, it's political more than scientific.
No, that's super interesting. And you know, kind of to go circle back to your company a little bit here. Can you tell me a little bit? You know, I'm kind of curious in your assets and your like stakeholders. I think you said you had 17. What was that? You had 17.
15 different
15.
royalties in the portfolio. So
Okay.
those would be in the United States, Canada, those two world-class assets that we just acquired in northern Saskatchewan. We've got other assets, longer dated assets in Canada that'll be big future mines. They may not cash flow as immediate term as Cigar Lake and MacArthur River. The mine in Namibia, which is quite an early mover in that regard. And so again, we're quite proud of the portfolio for a young company, but we're we're very actively really looking at every potential mine around the world, and including some of those byproduct opportunities that you raised, whether it's nickel, cobalt. We might be able to provide financing to extract the uranium and take 100% of the uranium offtake, which would be a great fit for our company. So again, if you want exposure to diversified uranium mines around the world, URC is not a bad way to get that.
And you know, it's interesting about the recycling thing. I've been saying for a while on live streams, I really think in the future, dumps where stuff's disposed of, I think they're going to get reprocessed to get all the disposed of silver and gold and other metals and stuff in the future. I totally believe that.
Sure.
So that kind of goes along with that, but a little bit more, I'm just interested, like, what are your goals in 2021 and where do you really see this industry heading?
Yeah. So again, we came out of 2020, we launched in 2019. We still sit with a lot of the money that we raised from the IPO at the end of 2019. 2020, it's not that we weren't active. We were talking to every miner and developer in the world, but it was just a little bit tricky with the financial markets. We're a capital provider, so we had to be a little more cautious given what was going on. But we have total confidence that we're on the back end of COVID. Some regions a little slower than others, but we're full speed ahead, like the Canadian acquisitions made 2-3 weeks ago. We bought physical uranium just last week as part of an option that we have under a supply agreement with Kazatomprom and Yellowcake out of London. But we're really actively looking at adding those next royalties and streams. So we're looking at mines in Australia, Africa, US, and Canada to see where we can come alongside some of the more promising projects and provide them capital finance to get their mines over the hurdle and into production. So growth is the objective, and so we're full speed ahead in 2021.
I love when you talk about physical uranium. How about I throw you a couple ounces of some silver and gold, and you throw me some couple ounces of uranium? What do you think about that?
Well, we can do it. You probably don't. You probably can't take physical delivery of it, but you can have someone else store it for you. And I don't know if that causes you less.
I just want a few isotopes. That's all I want. That's all I want. So I got two final quick fun questions for you since you're up there in Canada. First off, do you watch Gold Rush at all? Gold Rush.
I do watch Gold Rush. I often wonder, being in the mining industry, how they get away with doing what they do. It doesn't seem like there's any sort of regulations or water quality testing or anything. I know how established mining companies, we are like so highly regulated in every aspect of air, water, soil, everything. But they just seem to be like mining up there. I mean, I love it. I'd love to be up there doing it with them. But yeah, it's a pretty cool show though. It's the dream of mining and gold, the old prospectors and that kind of artisanal.
So are you the Tony Beats of uranium? I think you might be.
Shorter hair.
Okay, my last Canadian question here. Do you watch The Curse of Oak Island?
I don't.
Okay, it's about Oak Island, and it's a group of guys that have been trying to find the treasure, the fabled treasure that's on there. They're like in the third season, and they're literally like drilling holes and finding old mine shafts and trying to find the treasure. It's really cool.
I saw a similar show that had a similar thing that was old Spanish gold in, I think, Utah or New Mexico. Maybe it was Utah. Love those stories. I mean, who doesn't love a good treasure hunt story?
No, totally. So I guess my last real question for you is, where can people find you, find more about your company, and try to get you just to give one isotope? I just want one physical isotope.
You can reach us through uraniumroyalty.com. And if you need to reach out through our IR group, certainly if individual viewers or listeners want to reach out to me personally, please contact our IR group. We're not such a big company that we can't take personal interest in every one of you out there. So if you have additional questions, please contact us through the website, and we'll be happy to follow up with you and tell you more about uranium that we didn't touch on today. But I think we had a pretty good overview.
Well, sir, I want to thank you so much. I think I'll go with your middle title, Mr. President Melbye. Thank you so much for the interview, sir. You know, I learned so much. Like, background on me, I totally worked in chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear, and taught HAZWOPER and helped with like radiological responses and stuff. So I know a little bit about, different materials, but it's so cool hearing about like the non-dangerous parts, right, of uranium and what it can be used for. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so, absolutely. It's great.
Thank you so much. I hope you can come back. And do you have any gold and silver or no?
I do. I'm a big gold bug. I just think with what's happening with, financial the financial mismanagement of the central banks and the kind of spending that's happening, I would feel naked if I didn't have a lot of gold in the portfolio. And then, I do like some of the industrial commodity. I mean, silver has not only intrinsic value, but industrial demand. And I'm very big on copper right now. There's so much copper in an electric vehicle that I think you're really going to see copper, nickel, cobalt, some of these companies really, really do well. So I think, be invested in hard assets at this time. Not to say that the global markets aren't continuing to go up, but it's nice to have something that might behave a little counter-cyclical if it goes the other way.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, you heard it there. Not only is he the master of uranium, but he is a gold and silver stacker. So thank you, sir. I'm going to check you out. Everybody check him out. And what do we say?
Catch you on the next one.
There we go. Thank you, sir. And see everybody later.
All right. Very cool. Take care.
One stacker on a journey to find silver.